Now let's contextualize scams in big history. Big history is don't look at anything less than 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. This is the shortest period in which you're going to look. And the way you look at scams depends on who you hate most. If you hate politicians most, your attitude is criminals have taken over government, they prey on people, they set up rules impossible to follow. So then you think about Mao. What did Mao do? He took over China, kicking out his competition, and he reduced people to penury within 10 years. But does that make us hate the Chinese? We admire them for it. We admire them for their ability to destroy their society 3 or 4 times over in the space of 70 years. The Cultural Revolution sent millions of people like you and I to villages to be re-educated. Children were asked to denounce their parents, and their parents were then shot on the streets and their bodies hung out on trees. Millions died. Millions died later in the villages because people like you and I don't know how to run a plow, we don't know how to milk a cow. So they died. The banking system collapsed how many times over? Why is there no family life to speak of in China? Why is it such a self-serving society? Mao worked hard to destroy all cultural family structures. They have no religion left. They've been traumatized. In comparison to that, think about us. Granddaddy, somebody you remember very fondly. You're probably spending the money he earned. He bought some property here for a song. You don't need to work for the rest of your life because you're spending that money. Imagine if Mao had shown up here, what would have happened to us? We would have been living in some village in Chhattisgarh. Most of us would have been dead. Now if you hate businessmen instead of hating politicians, then you say crony capitalism is subverting due process of law. So how does it work? Everybody, you read Polyester Prince. The new book is called Ambani and Sons. Fascinating read. Polyester Prince of course got banned because Dhirubhai Ambani was a bit sensitive about it, but his children are much more magnanimous and generous. Basically, it's a long list of subversion of due process and purchase of policy for cash. And so you look at this and you say, these are robber barons there. The robber barons used to be in the Rhine Valley. They would put chains across the river and nobody would cross and you have to pay them. And since if you've been to the Rhine Valley, there's a castle every 5 kilometers, there was a lot of people to pay. And this is what it is right now. But what you forget is that what was happening in America at the turn of the century? What was Rockefeller's life? He consolidated the whole oil industry doing what? Intimidation tactics. But when you look at it in historical process terms, what you realize is people like Rockefeller they enter into a void of regulation and they behave with such excess and so outrageously that it immediately leads to the creation of a rash of new regulations which fixes the problem. So although I don't necessarily agree with everything that civil society was doing, the fact is that the excesses of today are creating a whole movement where people like Kejriwal are stepping in, rightly or wrongly, for good or for bad, there will be others. And our society will transform in the next few years just because it's politically out of control. So I see the parallel economy and the scams and the unearthing of the scams more than the scams are part of a historical process that we are having in India today. And I made sure I write these words down and they are there on the board for you. There is little purpose in having defocused debates about vaguely defined moral issues based on unexamined ideological assumptions. Because they don't explain anything. Unless you see a problem in the context in which it is occurring, the judgment you make is flawed.